Punctuating quotations seems a lot more complicated than it actually is. There's only a few things that you need to remember. So, if you want to have a quotation after a full sentence in an essay, then you're going to use a colon. So, if we're using an example from the book The Great Gatsby, a sentence might be, Gatsby's unyielding hope guides him to achieve his childhood goals, and it allows him to love unconditionally. That's a full sentence, so we have a colon, and then we have our quote. It was an extraordinary gift of hope, a romantic readiness such as I had never found in any other person. Note that the period, even though this is a full sentence, is outside of the parentheses right here. So you always want to put this period outside of the page number. So if you want a quotation after a sentence fragment, so you're not using a full sentence, then you use nothing, no punctuation. So for example, if we're still using The Great Gatsby, when Nick asks if Daisy was driving, Gatsby answers. That's not a full sentence, so we have nothing there. Of course I'll say I was, page 143, period, outside of the parentheses. Note, if you're using dialogue in a novel, for example, saying things like he said, she said, you do want to have a comma. So the only time you don't have a comma is when you're quoting a piece of literature in an essay. Some additional information is that you only want to capitalize the first letter of the quotation if it is the beginning of a sentence. If you're taking something from a middle of a sentence, you don't want to capitalize the first letter. Some additional information is that you want to have quotation context, so you want to describe what is happening during the quote, but you don't want to give a huge plot summary. So you don't want to have something that says, Gatsby hosts parties every weekend, and one time Nick was lucky enough to be invited. Everybody was having a really good time dancing, laughing, and chatting, but it seemed to Nick that Gatsby was separated from his guests. Quote, no one swooned backward on Gatsby, and no French bob touched Gatsby's shoulder, and no singing quartets were formed with Gatsby's head for one link. Wow, that's a lot of information for one quote. We do not want to do that. What we want to do is sum that up as quickly as possible. Even at Gatsby's own grand parties, he separated from his guests. That's what we want to do. So, a quick review of what we learned is that if a quotation is after a full sentence, you want to use a colon. If a quotation is after a sentence fragment, you use nothing. Put periods outside of the parentheses, and start a quotation with a capital letter only if it is the beginning of a sentence. Also, provide quotation context. Fun fact about when you use the word quotation versus the word quote. Quote is a verb, so you would use it, for example, when Obama quoted Martin Luther King Jr. Quotation is a noun. Hey, look at this cool quotation I found. So now you can seem really smart when you correct your friends when they misuse quote and quotation. And I hope citing work in your essays will be much easier from now on.